Our mission is love. Our vision is love. Jamaicans for justice. The people's champion, champion, champion. Justice, justice for all. Justice under the law. Justice, Jamaica demand. Right to life, right to liberty.
Happy Monday, happy Monday. Welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Justice. My name is Michael Jackson, Executive Director of JFJ. And you will realize that I'm here flying solo today because Jade Williams, our attorney at law and co-host, she's actually in Westmoreland for the Mario Dean matter. But before we get into today's show, just want to say thank you all for continuing to support the show. And thanks for those who are listening in via Radioland, those who are on the nationwide YouTube platform, as well as those who are joining us via JFJ YouTube's page. It's also important that we recognize some of our funding partners who make this show possible, where you can have a non-governmental organization like JFJ being able to partner with Nationwide to have this show aired each week. So we say thank you to our donors, the European Union, the Commonwealth Foundation, and I don't want to miss anybody, but we have another donor that also helps support our show that is aired each week. So thank you so much to EU and the Commonwealth Foundation for some of the funding support that we receive to do this important public education. Now, today we're going to be discussing, and I see Vanessa scribbling away in WhatsApp to send me something as soon as possible, just in case I missed any of our donor partners. So as soon as Vanessa, who is our producer, if you will, send us the name of that donor, then I will share it. And I hope they're not unhappy with me at the moment. But anyway, we're going to be discussing Ungagging the Integrity Commission for today's show. But before we get into it, let me just share with you the trivia that we have for today. And I always get myself in trouble because I'm the giveaway credit person. But the trivia that we have today is, when was the Integrity Commission established here in Jamaica? And I will add something on. Which three institutions were merged to become what is now called the Integrity Commission? So I'm just adding my own little tidbit to this question. So the one that I'm approved to be asking that the team submitted to me is, when was the Integrity Commission first established in Jamaica? But I'm adding something else now. Which three institutions were merged to become the Integrity Commission? And out of my personal pocket, I'll be giving away $1,500 credit for that one, for the second question, and the first is whatever the team normally gives to you when you win. All right? So a little bit of an update. We know that the Mario Dean case, it has been languishing, if you will, before the courts for some time. And we were trying to have the matter get underway when it was at the St. James Circuit Court. And with advocacy from JFJ, as well as some judicial activism, I call it, by Justice Bertram Morrison, you would recall that the matter was transferred to the Westmoreland Circuit Court. So Jade Williams, Ranzoni Rainford, two attorneys here at JFJ, and Tashwa James, our digital media officer, they went to the Westmoreland Circuit Court to hear what went underway today. And what I can tell you is that for the Mario Dean case, there is a case management hearing this Friday, and case management is really just the judge listening to the state of readiness of the matter by the state and issuing whatever orders the judge may deem appropriate. But the trial itself gets underway March 3. That's the date for the trial, March 3. Now, some other things were of interest based on what I'm being told. The matter is being heard by Justice Courtney Day. All the accused were present today. The Indicom officer was there as well. We were also told that the circuit has been extended beyond the usual 4 weeks to now 8 weeks, because there are 347 matters on the list for this circuit. While we are not yet aware of how many jury summons have been issued for the Mario Dean case, we were not told that specific detail. But generally speaking, 500 summons were sent overall, 316 served so far, with some 60 or 70 jurors registered based on the information that we gleaned this morning when we went to court. Now, when case management happens on Friday, we will have more detail in terms of whether or not jury summons were actually issued for the Mario Dean matter. Because one of the things here that we're watching keenly at JFJ is whether or not the state is adhering to the Jury Act in ensuring that the timeline stipulated is being observed. That is a 21-day period within which jury summons are to be issued. So we are observing the matter on behalf of the family, and we hope that come March 3, the trial will actually get underway, because none of the excuses that we have heard in the past, we don't expect to hear them again. That's what we're hoping that the state can adhere to, because it is important that for this particular circuit, we actually see the trial commencing and coming to some conclusion where Mercer Fraser, the mother of Mario Dean, can have justice realized for her son. And of course, the accused, they do have the right to a fair trial. So we hope that, again, the matter will get underway on March 3 as scheduled, and we will get a sense of what the conclusion will be for that particular case. But again, justice is not just a principle here in this country. It is a key component of our democratic infrastructure, as it is in other jurisdictions. So the matter must be heard. All right. Another update I want us to touch on as we segue into today's program. Now, we are aware that the Integrity Commission chair, that's Justice Seymour Panton, his 5-year period, that is tenure, comes to an end on February 25. Now, there is an option for renewal, but based on what has been reported in the media following a communication sent by Justice Panton, we don't expect, well, he has already indicated, Justice Panton, that he will not be seeking a renewal. And certainly he indicated that if he were so offered that opportunity, he would decline. One of the things here at JFJ, I want us to say very publicly, that we acknowledge the good work of Justice Seymour Panton. We acknowledge that he served the Integrity Commission with dedicated service towards our anti-corruption framework. His tenure, in our estimation, is marked by steadfast commitment to transparency and accountability. Now, in that communication that Justice Panton wrote to his team, he acknowledged that there were several challenges faced during his tenure, where at some point the comments coming from our parliamentarians were at times adversarial or filled with innuendos that almost energize their political base to make some of the more or most disparaging comments towards those who work at the Integrity Commission. And as we acknowledge the good work that Justice Panton gave of himself towards the Integrity Commission, we want to urge those who remain to continue to serve without fear or favor, and continue to serve the country with the greatest levels of integrity themselves. And as the Governor General, His Excellency Sir Patrick Allen, he has discretion to appoint another commissioner, and we trust that he will exercise his discretion with the integrity that he has also demonstrated to Jamaica based on his service so far, where we know that we will be getting an independent person who has independent thought of mind that will continue to serve the Integrity Commission with that type of steadfast service that we have seen from the other commissioners to date. And this is an opportunity for renewal where we hope that the parliamentarians will end some of the rhetoric that have been made towards the Integrity Commission. But the Integrity Commission itself, there is an opportunity for renewal where the trust of the public can be so engendered and strengthened with the new leadership that is to come. All right, so again, we're talking on gagging the Integrity Commission. So this is a segue into today's topic that we have. And the Did You Know will also segue into the topic that we have for today. And the Did You Know that we have is around the Transparency International data that was released recently. This is Jamaica's position on Transparency International's Corruption Perception Index country ranking. And Jamaica, we have fallen 4 places for 2024. We are now ranked 73 out of 180 countries compared to 69 out of 180 countries that we had in 2023. Jamaica's 2023 CPI score is 44 out of 100, where 0 means highly corrupt, 100 means very clean, but we have remained unchanged. So though we have fallen some 4 places, the score itself has remained unchanged at 44. So that's the Did You Know for today. And we were at a launch that was held by National Integrity Action, NIA, where Daniel Archer, the principal director, shared these ranking that we saw from Transparency International. I was also listening to Nationwide this morning with their Blue Dot survey findings, and we're also seeing where the perception of corruption is one of those stickling issues for Jamaica or for Jamaicans, wherein we do have a concern collectively as a country. And one of the things I'm going to be probing with our 2 guests, Jeanette Calder, Executive Director of Jamaica Accountability Portal, and Daniel Archer, Principal Director of NIA, who will be joining us, is do we understand definition of corruption? Because I heard that coming out in a discussion had with George Davis and Tana Thomas this morning. So we're going to be probing those 2 questions with our guest. But we take the break and then we pick up with our guest on gagging the Integrity Commission.
At the Jamaica Customs Agency, we care for our employees, customers, stakeholders, citizens, and our country. Customs cares. The temperature by the Jamaica Customs Agency is
29 degrees Celsius here in Kingston and 28 out west in Montego Bay.
And everybody make me yeah. Me have to ask, why eat all the snacks when sunshine has the best for you? Nature's best buns are crunchy. The flavor that sings to you, salted banana and plantain. Taste the freshness, naturally sweet. The flavor that sings to you.
Ayo, nature's best bunch.
Good afternoon and welcome back to Let's Start Justice. We're discussing the topic of Ungagging the Integrity Commission, and we're joined by Jeanette Calder, Executive Director of Jamaica Accountability Meter Portal, JAMP, and Daniel Archer, who is an attorney at law and Principal Director of National Integrity Action. Thank you so much, both of you, for taking time out of your busy Monday to joining us here on Let's Start Justice.
Sure.
Always a pleasure
Thank you for the
to join you.
invitation. Glad to be in the conversation.
All right, perfect.
Likewise.
Um, Jeanette Calder, let's start with you. I was saying I was listening to a program this morning before we get into the gag clause conversation. And the sentiment was that Jamaicans, we don't quite understand the meaning of corruption, what exactly that entails. Do you share that perception?
Well, I would really have to be guided by, I'm not quite sure the source and what was the source for the source. Is it a survey that was
It
done?
it,
And
it,
if,
it, it was George Davis and Tana Thomas. They were talking about corruption with a few guests this morning. One included Lloyd B. Smith, Dr. Nadine Spence, and Jermaine Barrett, about the fact that several Jamaicans, we remain concerned about corruption in the country, but whether or not we may be conflating governance issues with corruption. And whether or not we really understand what corruption meant. I think that was the sentiment of the guest this morning. So I just
well,
wanted to get your perception on that.
I would say it's a generally fair statement to say we don't understand it. And one of the reasons I can be fairly confident in saying that, Mikhail, is there were elements of corruption I did not understand, even as a civil society advocate dealing with it. And if that don't say a lot, if that's not a mouthful, I don't know what would be. So, for example, I think most Jamaicans are clear on some levels of corruption. A contract is to be given, and you give it to your friend. I think people understand it, and that not really supposed to happen, and that is corruption. You getting a kickback off a contract. I think they understand that that's not supposed to happen. But if you get paid to direct the contract to somebody, I think they understand it. I, for myself, when it gets a little bit more nuanced, I did not understand it. So, for example, I've shared on Nationwide before in a discussion on an evening program with Cliff that I was engaged in what would be strictly defined by law as a corrupt act, Michael, a couple of years ago, and I did not know by law that it was a corrupt act because I thought corruption was just if money exchange hands. But by law, for example, any kind of benefit or advantage or blight or gift, any kind of advantage that is exchanged between you and somebody because that somebody is a public official in a position of power. The law even says, Michael, any favor. I didn't understand that, and I'm pretty sure the Jamaican people wouldn't understand that if you're going to pay taxes in the line and a public official who's a brethren give you a cut, that is an advantage that you are benefiting and a favor that disadvantages another citizen. It is an abuse of that public official's power, and that can be considered corruption in the eyes of the law. Most Jamaicans wouldn't have understood that. So I would say the depth of it, no. The legal definition by which many Jamaicans could find themselves in trouble with the law in terms of corruption, no, we don't. But in terms of what most of us are more concerned about, which is grand larceny, I think Jamaicans are very clear that is happening and what that is and that is wrong. Yes.
All right, thank you so much. Danielle, from where you sit, I just wanted to set the framework before we get into the nuance of the gag clause. You've done work from NIA in terms of how people view corruption. Even if you're not able to indicate some of the percentage from memory, what were some of the findings from the survey? I think I remember coming to an event last year, it was, where you shared some findings about how Jamaicans view corruption. From where you sit, what is your perception?
I can share that with you again. And that perception was that a majority of the politicians. So I think Jamaicans understand that when we talk about corruption, it's not just a question of governance, it's a question of politicians using their position for personal gain. They see it. And they will say in the poll, I will give you those figures in a short while, how many in terms of politicians or police personnel that they thought were the most corrupt of any group.
Yeah.
So they understand that and they see corruption. And, it's funny. You use a complex term as corruption and people can put semantics onto it and change it and tell you it's only just about governance, it's only just about this. But give credit to our Jamaicans, our fellow friends, neighbors, or family. They understand what it is. They know what bribery is. They understand what fraud is. They get the understanding of embezzlement. You know, the Jim Screechy way that you're going to be using company funds to advance your own personal agenda. So they understand it. When we talk about corruption, I think the perception and people feel that you're stabbing at the public servants in particular, not recognizing, as Jeanette actually points out, that there is a level of corruption on and in display in our everyday landscape. And it is a question of being able to change the mentality. A majority of Jamaicans do believe that corruption is a way of life, or just so the thing said. And that is what we have to change, because it seems that because that's how it is, we accept it. The other flip to it is that we accept it because we are fearful of speaking out about it. And our study showed that over 58% of persons were afraid to speak out against corruption because of the fear.
Yeah. Have you managed to put your hands on the data, or you need a little bit more time?
Yeah, man, I'm pulling it out now. So just pulling it up right now.
You know,
I came across the one with the gag clause, but that's what you're asking me about. So in terms of the data, we have 82% of the persons, that this was 2023, 82% of those polls indicate that they were more aware of corruption issues now compared to 2 years ago. Among the public, the highest areas of agreement were that all parliamentarians should disclose their assets annually. 80% of persons polled believe that. They indicated that 71% persons said there were more channels available to them to deal with corruption than 2 years ago. The lowest perception is that reporting corruption that they are aware of, 16% of persons have done it. 22% persons believe that they have been victims of corruption. And that's interesting because that means that many Jamaicans don't understand that when public officials fail to account for funds, or when they use public funds for private gains, we are the victims because we have poor hospitals, we have poor schools, we have poor roads. In fact, when those who have the authority to give contracts for the road fail to ensure that the road works are properly supervised and the amount of asphalt is used and it is done the right way, that we become victims of corruption, because every time we drop in our pothole and the front end gone, because by corruption, we are dropping our potholes in the road and not fixed properly. Point I want you to understand is there is room for Jamaicans to understand and appreciate the level of victimization, and that everyone is in fact a victim of corruption.
Yes.
There's more data. It would take some time for us to go through that. The public perception that politicians and people and the police, have the highest levels of corruption has not changed since 2021. The view that the police have the highest level of corruption is relatively stable, moving from 23% in 2021 to 22% in 2023. The perception that the highest level of corruption is among the politicians continues its marginal increase, moving from 65% in 2021 to 68% in 2023.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing, because I think as we understand
the
how...
data,
Yes,
more
go
than
ahead.
2/3 believe that the highest level of corruption can be found among politicians.
Among politicians.
This is followed by the police at 22%.
So you see, when we start looking through the data, it's important to set that type of context, because I think a lot of people, let me not say a lot because I haven't done a survey, but when I look at some of the sentiment on social media about the gag clause and why are we making a big deal about this issue, it's just to set the framework about the importance of the Integrity Commission having an ability to speak on certain matters within a particular framework. So for those who are not aware, when we talk about the gag clause, we're talking about section 53, subsection 3 of the Integrity Commission Act, that prevents information about an investigation from being publicly shared unless and until a report is tabled before the House of Representatives. We tend to focus a lot on the gag clause, but there is another restrictive section in the Integrity Commission Act, that is section 56, that prohibits the disclosure of various matters related to any investigation by the Integrity Commission. So if you remember how the Contractor General used to be able to share information about contracts, what is the award amount for those contracts, who those contracts were awarded to. The Integrity Commission cannot share those information anymore. And one of the questions we're asking ourselves, or we should be asking Parliament, who does it serve to have these particular provisions remain as is? So let me go back to you, Jeanette, because some 73% of the submissions that were made to Parliament, including submissions from all three of us here, NIA, JAMP, JFJ, we made a recommendation to remove the type of restriction from Section 53, Gag Clause, Section 56, from the Integrity Commission Act. But the sentiment of the parliamentarians is that they are simply not moved by these calls, and they are there to act on behalf of the public, not necessarily the civil society organizations. How do you start out? Let me just ask, what is your response to even such a comment and the fact that 73% submission said remove, but the parliamentarians are unmoved, unpersuaded by the calls that we've collectively made?
Right, well, the first thing I would want to say, Mikkel, is that I would want to validate. I've always started from the place of acknowledging that we had a problem. That there was a certain high level, very high level, I think, of unfairness in the way in which the previous entity, the Office of the Contractor General, would have initiated investigations, and it definitely needed to be dealt with. The challenge that JAMP has is it no matter where we talk to people, whether those in the know, in Parliament, in government, everybody tells us the same reason for why we have this gag clause. And that reason, I there was a time I really wouldn't want to state it publicly, but I think it has been said so many times it's okay to do so. But it is very, very difficult for me to understand that the government had a challenge with one anti-corruption body, one accountability body, and in choosing to deal with how the head of that agency at a particular point in time would begin investigations, it chose to create a provision in a legislation to handle the behavior of one particular public official. So here we are as a country, we have to be fighting one of the major things that denies us the best public goods and services, that actually impacts directly on the quality of our lives. And when you really peel it back, Ms. Jackson, I am being told that the reason that the section in the Act exists is to correct the behavior stemming from a public official who was in charge of the Contractor General's office at a point in time.
Yeah.
No,
Jeanette, pause that question, pause the response for me. We have to take the break, please.
Good morning and welcome to the newest addition to the Nationwide News Network family on Hot 102.
Good afternoon, I'm Erica Allen.
I'm Elizabeth Bennett. In Nationwide News at this hour.
This is Nationwide. I'm Cliff Hughes.
And I'm Carol Narcisse.
Morning, welcome to This Morning on Hot 102.
Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Beverly and it's Manley. Good morning and welcome.
For 20 years, Nationwide 90 FM has been your trusted source for breaking news, delivering critical updates when you needed them most. 3:37 in the afternoon, we interrupt to bring you more from the One Don Klansman gang trial. Another guilty verdict. With fearless, fact-based journalism that unearthed the truth.
Between 2012 and 2018, nearly $5.5 million was taken from the track legend.
And insightful commentary that sparked meaningful conversations and shifted perspectives.
Welcome to the front page. I'm Emily Crooks.
I am Naomi Francis. We're pleased to be joined by Roger Clark.
From the stories that shook Jamaica,
we're having an earthquake,
to those that inspired change and left lasting impacts.
in 2014 to be dealing with an issue such as the Mariodine case.
Nationwide 90 FM has been there, diving deep into the issues that matter most to you. As we mark 20 years of dedicated service in 2025, we honor the trust you have placed in us and reaffirm our commitment to serving you, the Jamaican people. Rooted in truth, fairness, and integrity, we continue to provide incisive reporting with a foundation of accountability and respect. While we celebrate our journey, we are also focused on the future, fueled by the same passion and purpose that has always driven us. Thank you for supporting Team Revolution for 2 decades. Stay with us. The best is yet to come.
Welcome back to Let's Talk Justice. We're joined by 2 of our more brilliant ladies, and I say that based on my personal interaction and having been influenced by their brilliance. Jeanette Calder, Executive Director of JAMP, and Principal Director of NIA, Daniel Archer. Jeanette, before the break, you were explaining that from your view, it seems as if this gag clause was born out of because of how a previous institution used to act.
Well, I'm saying more than that. Yeah, actually.
Yes.
I'm saying it is not just my view. I've come to that view because it doesn't matter if I have a conversation with journalists, informed thought leaders in Jamaica, public officials, parliamentarians. The answer I get is the same. So I have come to the conclusion, and I think it's important, Michael, that the public remembers. We've been having this conversation for so long. I think in order to talk about it today, we have to remember what triggered this gag clause in order for us to decide whether or not this was the best solution for the problem we were told we had.
Yes.
And the problem we were told we had is not one that relates to the question of how best to handle anti-corruption reports or anti-corruption investigations. That's not it. If that were the case, if we were looking at it from the point of view of what is best as a principle, then we would be talking about how we treat with the Auditor General initiating reports. We would then be talking about MOCA, and we would certainly be talking about the Financial Investigation Division of the Ministry of Finance that handles financial crime. What we have been discussing for the last 6 or 7 years, actually even before, during the drafting of the legislation, is the Office of the Contractor General, one entity that at a particular time in history had a particular head that would initiate investigations by pretty much having a media interview before they got to a point of any preliminary investigations where they could say, okay, we have seen and heard enough to say, Jeanette Calder, you are the subject of this investigation. They were already out talking to the media, and that is true that it did unnecessarily impact people's reputation, both the public official and usually the private sector entity that was involved in any kind of rumor or anything that that entity wanted to look at.
Yeah.
So the question is, since it's not a principle, what was the best way for our parliament or our government or our cabinet, who would be concerned as citizens were, what would have been the best way to handle what we thought, not the best governance by the head of the agency of the Office of the Contractor General? And what JAMP is saying, our position on our board is that the best way of dealing with a public official who you think their behavior is damaging, is recalcitrant, is not in keeping with a head of agency, is not to go to the Parliament of Jamaica and set a legislation and a provision that curtails the activities of one entity. It is to deal with it from the point of view of a human resource problem, because that's the problem you were having, Miguel.
Yeah.
So what has happened?
Yeah.
A new entity, and that's how I want Jamaicans to look at it. It is a new entity that has been formed, merging 3 existing bodies, given a new mandate with an entirely new structure. And I'm saying this to say, Michael, and we can get further into it. part of the challenge that people are having with the gag clause is a misunderstanding of that same public official now being in the Integrity Commission and the role that that person plays. They are no longer the head of that agency. They are no longer entitled to call the shots. But we have created a provision that shuts down communication with the people about their business in a way that we think has a negative impact on an investigation. And just for a preliminary comment, I'm saying, Michael, I don't believe that that was the best way for the parliament and the government to handle a behavior on the part of a public official that they did not think was appropriate. To create legislation and shut down an entity for perpetuity was not the best way to do it. And we can talk about that a little bit further on.
Yes, thank you so much for outlining that. Before I bring in Daniel, just to also indicate that when you have, that kind of one-man band approach with how institutions are structured, the Integrity Commission, beyond the gag clause and some of this, the smaller nuances within the Act, is one of the better examples of how commissions of parliament can be structured, because you have a commission, 5-member commission. You have statutory directors, different from the operational staff. So it's also to look at the institutional structure and whether or not that in and of itself could have fixed some of the issues that you saw with the Office of the Contractor General. Daniel, reputational harm. Are we being unfair to public officials and parliamentarians specifically by asking for the gag clause to be removed? Danielle? Oh,
Hello, you hearing me?
Yes, we're hearing now.
All right. I said no, and I've said it before, and I'll continue to say the reputation of any parliamentarian and or politician is not greater than the reputation of any average, regular, ordinary Jamaican. That's one. Regardless of the position they hold, they in fact are more responsible to the Jamaican public as they are employed to the Jamaican public and as such have a greater duty to the Jamaican public to ensure that they are doing things the best way possible, adapting to and applying the rules. So no, I don't think so. I will agree, however, that there is reputational harm when there are and has been the release of information that it cannot be substantiated or has failed to be substantiated. And NIA has put forward that you can actually use a balance. And that balance would be, we recommended the New Zealand model, and we thought that there were certain things that the New Zealand model had that they could use. And they could have that criteria written into the legislation that allows the office of the Integrity Commission to speak specifically to matters that touch and concern matters of public interest, where they are, letting us know exactly, what level of investigation is. So if you look at the New Zealand website, and it's the Serious Fraud Office, you will see a heading that says making of cases public, and it says the Serious Fraud Office must be careful not to say anything that might compromise an ongoing investigation or a matter that is proceeding through the court. And at the very bottom, they have a statement, and they indicate that they will generally not comment on the investigation until the point where charges, if any, have been filed. However, they will issue a public statement where it's a question or a matter of public interest, reputational damage or harm to individuals or businesses under investigation, level of detail required to ensure high levels of accuracy in reporting, other information which is in the public arena, example, confirmation of a referral to the Serious Fraud Office by another agency, investigations into the relevant matter by other organizations, as well as utilizing Solicitor General guidelines or media protocols for prosecutors. So they do recognize that, and they understand that there's going to be reputational and could be reputational harm. So there's a criteria, a checklist that is utilized to ensure that if a statement is being made, then you are going to be utilizing this opportunity to inform the public, which is important. And that is important, Nikia, because when we did our poll in 2023, we found that a majority of the persons who understood about the gag clause, so the data was Less than a third are aware of the Integrity Commission can't comment on ongoing investigations due to the gag clause. And those who knew about it were of the view that the gag clause should be removed. And I think it is an opportunity to help the Parliament move from a point of fear and anger. And Jeanette is correct. Legislation ought not to be emotionally constrained. It ought not to be influenced by emotion. And unfortunately, when it comes to the Integrity Commission, the fear and anger coming from that which existed has carried over into our parliamentarians and how they view legislation that is expected and has existed before even the Contractor General's office, to ensure that they operate within the gamut of ensuring that there's transparency and accountability for their public actions.
Yes.
In fact, one of the things that I think is important as we talk about the gag clause and the parliamentarians, and I go back to what you said to Jeanette about the comments about civil society, we voice the public concerns. And I think if Parliament wants to ensure that they are representing the public's interest and not their private interest, because remember, we have to draw that line, Nobody in Parliament is there to represent their own interest, It's not their shop, it's not their practice, it's not their business at all. It's the people's business. So what they need to do would be to ensure that they provide a proper avenue to ensure what voices are being heard, because their opinion don't matter with the greatest of respect. They should be getting the view from the parliamentarians.
Yes.
We should be hearing about constituency meetings and the parliamentarians coming forward to present the views of their constituency, not their own views, but the views of their constituency, and thereby allowing the public through Parliament to understand that whether it's Manchester or Clarendon, then the people that say them want it, Westmoreland say no, Clarendon say maybe, and that informs the changes.
Yes.
It is unjust for the changes to be informed by a few persons sitting because they have the legacy and they carry the trauma, as it would be said, about what happened in the past. That does not make good sense for appropriate legislation or effective legislation.
Thanks so much. Because, Jeanette, one of the concerns I'm having listening to the parliamentarians, and you would find that there is consensus across the aisle on certain issues. But that's another conversation for another day. But when you look, and we've also combed through legislation across several jurisdictions ourselves, and none of them we've managed to find anything even remotely close to a gag clause. So what you may find is that there is a general secrecy and confidentiality clause, like New Zealand, but you will, and like United Kingdom, but when you go on their website for the Serious Fraud Office, you will see guidelines about how to disclose information. When you go to Australia, their anti-corruption body actually have a provision that makes expressed provision for making public statement. So the question perhaps when we come back, and I'm asking you both just to stay with me for another 5 or so minutes, are the parliamentarians not being guided by legislation in other jurisdictions? Because that is a source of data rather than the emotion that Daniel spoke to. So Jeanette, we'll pick up with you about how much are they being guided, to what extent, by what exists in other jurisdictions.
The national budget is everybody's business because it impacts every Jamaican. The time brought to you by the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service is
15 minutes going up to 2 o'clock.
It's Monday, get over your blues. Or Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. The E-Zone is here for you. With the Stinger Honey Bee
and Karim Boyatings
from 3 to 5 p.m. on Nationwide 90 FM.
We've got your entertainment news.
Then we want to hear your views. Why you said?
Jump in the mix.
Or the hot seat.
Don't miss our brain busters.
Or the crazy giveaways.
Let's talk fashion.
Send us your outfit of the day. Ooh, cutesy. Very demure.
Are you looking for love?
Come come on one of our blind dates, send your request to ezoneblinddates@gmail.com. That's ezoneblinddates@gmail.com.
And stay tuned for your confessions.
These are my confessions.
Share them with us at ezoneconfessions@yahoo.com. I mean, is this planet Earth?
Is it?
I don't know. Let me check. Either way, it's got a buzz.
And a bugger thing.
Ow! Ow!
Welcome back to Let's Start Justice. We are discussing Ungagging the Integrity Commission, and I was asking Jeanette Calder before we went to the break, are our parliamentarians being guided by evidence to form policy positions, or are they actually just being guided by emotions? Because if none of the legislation that any of us have looked at suggests that any such similar clause exists elsewhere, what exactly is driving our parliamentarians? Jeanette Calder.
Right, that's a very easy question to answer. There's nothing I have heard today at any of the deliberations at the committee that is reviewing the act that suggests that they have found anything from a legislative standpoint outside of Jamaica that's guiding the position that they have, which we are assuming that nobody's going to budge, or we haven't heard anybody in the parliament saying definitively that they'll be prepared to reconsider it. I haven't heard anything. And you have to admit that we have been at this review for quite a while, and I would imagine, Michael, if there was any, they would have said so, particularly as you have civil society groups saying, we have done the research and we can't find any. That is the opportune time for the parliament to say, well, okay, we have done ours and this is what we're looking at. So I'm comfortable saying no such thing has been found to date that would make Jamaican politicians unique on the planet. My question back to the citizens listening is this: do other politicians in other jurisdictions not have reputations to be concerned with? What is it then that has informed them not going the route of a wholesome, complete gag? They have basically put what you call the public interest test and have decided that a handful of politicians or citizens, which is what our parliamentarians are, or a handful of public officials, their own concerns cannot rise above something as huge and as large and as impactful as the issue of corruption and their ability to combat it. So they had to find a middle ground, and they found it. Now, I just want to quickly say, Michael, it's not that there are parliamentarians who have not suggested a middle ground. And I just want to quickly let your citizens know that there have been, on the record, at least 2 parliamentarians, the Minister of Justice no less, in October 2021, basically indicated that he would have been quite in favor of his interpretation of 36.3, which should allow the Integrity Commission almost on a monthly basis to just tell the Parliament what investigations they have initiated. Notice that's not completed. That is an opinion of the Minister of Justice. He says the whole point of the gag was to stop frivolous allegations in the media. So if monthly you would just write to the Parliament, which is the responsible body, and tell us, then that is a more responsible and controlled way of sharing the information. That's significant. And last, the Shadow Minister of Finance, Julian Robinson, made a point, which is one of which JAMP has submitted. When a concern begins, Michael, in the public domain, when the media unearths a concern and the issue is already out there in the public domain. So what that means is we already know the minister, we already know the public official, and the matter has been exposed. He said he believes that in that case, the Integrity Commission should let the same public who is aware of the issue know that they have initiated an investigation and tell the public a time frame for the completion. Why? Public confidence.
Yes.
When something goes wrong, the people must know, say, their taxes and their institutions are dealing with it. To leave it open is to erode the trust in those institutions. So, Michael, those are two examples that have come from our parliamentarians. Other jurisdictions are using. They seem to have completely changed from that position now, and I think that's unfortunate.
Yes. Daniel Archer, I see some people here in our YouTube chat saying that we must protect people's reputation. And I think there's a misunderstanding that we're calling for this blanket provision to be made where the Integrity Commission can almost go out there willy-nilly and say anything at any time. Can you clarify for the listeners what exactly we're calling for?
That's not what it is. And I think what Jeanette said a while ago is perfectly understandable and explainable. Mm-hmm. Let's put it simply. We're all Jamaicans. Parliamentarians have a greater responsibility. They are attending to the public purse, and they have taken on a job as a public servant, which means that much more is demanded of them. In the shadows of what Jeanette has just explained, that says if the media unearths something, if there's an investigation ongoing, if one has been initiated, then the public ought to know. And I say that without fear of any contradiction. When a gentleman, one little brother, Ronai Khan, you all know them. So let me break it down as simply as we talk about it when we're in the bar, in a taxi, on the bus stop, anywhere we're there. And we say, man suspected. Yes? We get it all the time. We see it all the time. We are inviting you to come in. He's a suspect. He comes in, and it's not him. We have a case. There are many examples in the public domain now where a name or picture individual has been identified, and they're not the person responsible for the atrocity.
Yes.
And their reputation has been affected because you wouldn't employ them.
Yes.
The community going to say him did do the rape or him did do the killing or him did do the robbery. He can't repair his reputation. Even if it is he goes to court and sues. Sues what? How is he going to get money for what?
Yeah.
It's reasonable suspicion. So we have to apply that same balance. So nobody's saying that they're more important. And I do understand some politicians do believe that they're more important. They occupy a special place. I don't think they're more important than an average Jamaican. I do appreciate that you want to eradicate the carelessness, and I would use those words, the carelessness that would have occurred previously, that they have felt that has attacked and affected them and has caused them to fetter themselves now. But that's not the best position to stand and make legislation from.
Yeah.
If you want the public to trust you, you need to share information with the public.
You know, I want to add something else as well. Thanks, Jeanette and Daniel. Before we close out, one of the reasons for also having the Integrity Commission being ungagged, they also are the responsible agency for the Protected Disclosure Act. That's the whistleblowing law. So can you imagine that they're able to announce that we are doing an investigation into, let me use one of the things that they're asking us to speak on now, the Kingston and St. Andrew Municipal Corporation. And therefore, we're inviting anybody who knows about anything to come forward. That is also the possibility of a good use of ungagging the Integrity Commission, because you can encourage witnesses to come forward. But if you're completely gagged and you can't give an announcement on anything, how will we know who is being, not who, but what is being investigated to possibly have witnesses coming forward? So there are several things that could, benefit from the Integrity Commission being ungagged.
Yeah, that's a very crucial point you just made. That's in our submission. What Jam said is that the public can also know what is being investigated, not who. There is a big difference between the two. So that is another place that we could go to. Not the who, but the what. The people know about it will know that that's an opportunity to speak.
Yes. But before both of you leave, let me ask you, I'm not sure if you've had the opportunity to listen to the throne speech that was read by Stedman Fuller, Deputy Governor General. And there were some clear absences from me. Unexplained wealth order did not come back. The anti-bribery legislation did not come back. I'm not sure if you share the concerns in 30 seconds.
Actions in cash over $1 million, but we don't have a legislation that ensures that the fulfillment of the POCA legislation can be carried through at all levels. That's surprising. It's also surprising in respect of the anti-bribery legislation. That is something that was deliverable on a CMOC. It is something NIA is undertaking to campaign for, and it does indicate that there seems to be a watering down of the approach towards corruption. It's a concern that we are putting up the best defenses that we can against the multifaceted nature of corruption in our public sector. And we can't do it and don't do it and don't wish to do it in the public sector. We're certainly going to have a problem having the public conform to it in their own private space. So it's definitely a matter of concern.
Thank you so much. 30 seconds. Last word to you, Jeanette.
When I remain concerned about what's happening to our parliamentarians, but I will not lie that we are also looking at an entire nation. And I think when we apply the public sector test, we need to do more for the people of Jamaica in combating corruption, and we can't find a middle ground in dealing with this God clause.
All right, thank you both so much. That's where we have to leave it. Really appreciate your time. That was Daniel Archer, Principal Director and Attorney at Law for National Integrity Action, Jeanette Calder, Executive Director of Jamaica Accountability Meter Portal.
Thank you, Michael.
Have a good day, both of you. All right, so who is the trivia winner for today? Let me see. Vanessa, who won the question? News commentator win the first one. The second one, George, you're kind of wrong little bit, but we will still give it to you for, B for effort. So the three agencies that were merged to become the Integrity Commission in 2017 by virtue of the Act is the Office of the Contractor General, the Commission for the Prevention of Corruption, and the Integrity Commission Parliamentary Institution. So you missed out that word, George, parliamentary, but we will still give it to you. And WhatsApp your number to us at 239-7583, and we will send your credit based on your provider. All right, so that was Let's Start Justice today. And by the way, before we close out very quickly, let me say this. JFJ, we speak publicly on governance and accountability issues. We speak from a regulatory and a governance standpoint. The organization does not offer commentary on routine corruption issues. Yes, if it rises to a certain level, especially ones that may involve senior parliamentarians and public officials, we may speak on it, but remember, we're not an anti-corruption body, so you will not find the organization making comments on routine corruption matters unless it rises to a particular level that may involve several parliamentarians or so. But otherwise, we speak from the legislative framework. All right, so please be guided when you're asking us to speak on matters. But anyway, that's where we have to leave it. Thank you so much to our listeners, and we will see you next week. My name is Michael Jackson. Have a good day.
Jamaicans for justice, the people's champion. Justice, justice for all. Justice under the law. Justice, Jamaica demand. Right to life, right to liberty. Out of many we are one in a Jamaica. Make it a better place for the boys and girls. Created equal by the creator. For equal rights and opportunities. No to unlawful detention and police brutalization. Class, gender, race or religion. We not tolerate discrimination.
To join the fight against injustice, contact us at 755-4524 or Jamaicans4Justice.org.
The people's champion.
Good morning and welcome to the newest edition to the Nationwide News Network family on Hot 102.